So I have 3 criticisms of this poster series by Elliott. The first is that he's using posters which I consider to be inherently offensive and towards collective action. Elliott is using them with a defensive posture.
So hey, I thought I would sit up here on the corner of my flat file to strike a relaxed pose to make my videos more relatable, you know, as if you had just walked into my studio and caught me like I do, just kind of chilling, hanging out in my studio.
Hey,
what's going on? Sitting on top of my flat file. How you doing?
Good. How you doing?
Kind of like the white man thumb, you know, where Bill Clinton, they tell Bill Clinton, you know, don't point. That could be seen as aggressive. I did not have sexual relations with that woman. Lewinsky.
I'm Rory King, a designer, writer, and critic, and Elliott has asked me to write and critique some of his work, and that's what we're doing here today.
So how you feeling?
What
you got there?
Nervous.
So you good?
Got your review designed, printed out.
Great.
And just a readable copy. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I asked Rory King to write a comprehensive review, a critique of my work.
When I'm writing about a work, I just take notes, simple notes, pretty generic stuff. Is a black and white color, and make those simple thoughts more complex.
To do what we do around the 2D studio and to call my work into crisis. Real critique is a form of generosity.
It's super easy to disassociate your feelings towards someone, whether they're a friend, mentor, or whatever, because, at least in my opinion, I'm never writing about that person. I'm writing about their work.
There are three important things that are linked to, 3 important items that are linked to in the description below, and they're really important to this video. The first of which is Rory's actual written critique, which I would highly suggest that you download in PDF form and read, because it's structured thought. It communicates his ideas in a way that this video won't. There is an ebook companion available for, which is a different piece entirely. It's not the PDF, different piece entirely, that is available for the iPad as well as for Apple Books that you can download below. It's going to cost $1. You can check the link right here. The $1 cost is, you can think of it as trying to support the further development of publishing initiatives from Studio Practice. And the third thing that is available for download is a précis that I've created, a diagram of Rory's argument. So if you're interested in this video, make sure you download and read all 3 of the items linked below.
I basically went to Elliott's website just so I could see the archive of all these posters. Tried to find some similarities between the 2 and their differences, again on a very basic level. Every month, artist and designer Elliott Earls produces a hand-pulled screen-printed poster sized at 22 by 30 inches on 100% cotton paper with a decal edge, which are divided into 2 series that get released on an alternating monthly schedule. Yeah, the hand series I see as being very experimental, obviously seeing the hand of the artist or designer in it, and basically it's pretty goofy, it's pretty wild, you could even say filthy in a way. These prints feature characters exclusive to each series, but they all come from the same lineage, the primordial race of giants, the Cyclops. Cyclopses are known for their brute strength and one-eyed face.
Psst, Odysseus, what were you thinking bringing us in here? Look at that guy. He's huge. He's got a big old rock, and he's blocking the doorway.
You guys, I still think he might be cool. I mean, look at the way he's treating the sheep. He's okay. That's a little weird. It's a little strange. He's milking the can you milk sheep? I didn't even know you can milk sheep. He's very, very gentle, strangely gentle.
Here the Cyclops is a grotesque male genitalia with one eye on the scrotum, a wrinkly penis shaft for a long nose, and a buck-toothed mouth where the head of the penis should be. But this defaced Rocco's Modern Life heifer Cyclops isn't the only thing deformed. Typography and illustrated motifs read almost like glossolalia because of their inverted, rotated, and three-dimensional rendering.
All right, well, you've seen those Pentecostal preachers, and the Pentecostal worshipers fall down on the ground and speak in tongues, right? Well, that's glossolalia.
If somebody's got demons, if somebody's bound by demons, they don't need the men in the white coats. They don't necessarily need medication. They need somebody with authority and power and anointing that says, be gone in the name of Jesus and be set free. I've seen it. I know what I'm talking about. Man. The politically correct mindset would say, I'm a crazy man. The politically correct mindset would say, don't listen to him. He's a nut. He's an Elmer Gantry type person. Don't listen to him. I'm telling you, you can think whatever you want to think about me, but if you ever hear me preach, I'm going to preach to you the Word of God. Man, it's time to pray, church.
Elliott is using him with a defensive posture. You can see that in the individualism and isolation of the characters and the worlds that he's building within these posters. It's also seen in the way that he makes these posters. So the glossolalia, I'm saying, is within some of this language here that doesn't really make much sense. It's, to my understanding, only Elliott can speak it or understand it. You can't even classify these phrases as broken English or primitive syntax. It's all filler with no urgency. This gibbering is then carried over to what seems like the arbitrary positioning of all the elements on these prints. Graphic motifs extruding from other motifs, creating an experimental space in which this Cyclops lives.
I had to process what was going on. The conventions of large scale, the conventions of
density of arbitrary elements on this kind of have Elliott saying, look, I can put anything down on the page and it's going to be sick, and that almost that if a lesser designer were to do this, it wouldn't be as good as what he's doing. But I'm trying to argue that that isn't enough, and that there's other models and sort of aesthetics that many people are attracted to, and it's not just good craftsmanship or good composition. The most difficult challenge with writing criticism is we're supposed to be generous to the work, and a lot of times I can be extremely generous to build up all these thoughts and components about the work, and then I end up kind of actually loving the work, or something I may have hated originally, I'm now in love with, and then to kind of give it a point of crisis can sometimes be hard. So yeah, it's sort of this reverse psychology kind of thing, where I'm almost talking myself out of it. It's actually finding the crisis, I guess, in a way. Yeah. This was one of the prints that I actually was in love with. It's this fucking frame that's so sick. But yeah, this was great, and also there's an Ed Fellow one in here, collaboration, that I think is really good, which again kind of goes to the sort of collective idea I was talking about, where Ed and Elliott are collaborating, and I think it makes something really beautiful. Where the linear one is a bit more clean cut, somewhat commercial aesthetic to it. So in this linear series, I say that Elliott is using some op art techniques to sort of kind of hypnotize the viewer. I kind of go on sort of this capitalism tangent in regards to that. But the line work on this mixed with the color separations, to my mind, give it like a 3D render, which I also say kind of gives it this high art kind of sensibility. So that kind of falls under that sort of commercial aesthetic.
Yo, major key alert.
Do you know it costs money to eat food?
I don't know how many times I have to say it. Download the ebook or Rory's PDF in order to fully get a sense of his critique. There's the theorization component, contextual component, and linguistic components that just simply aren't going to translate to this form. This video is a companion to his review. Make sure you download the ebook in the link below.
That kind of individualism leads to something I find problematic within graphic design, which I think we're starting to push away from, but I find that these prints are sort of defending, which is that these genius designers are kind of who we should be listening to, or who should dictate how the design profession and discipline should be run. And I'm sort of arguing that newer generations of designers are finding that a collective voice is the better way of going about that. The central point of my critique here is that Earls is holding on to that archaic method, or that archaic sort of idea of how graphic design can be successful. We are the ones, the critics, the viewers, the audience, we are the ones to interpret the work. And so therefore, as an artist, as a designer, you need to be open to those viewpoints. So again, I'm just calling it like I see it. Elliott is kind of alienating a larger audience to whatever he's trying to speak about, again, in these, to me, sort of arbitrary posters. But again, that collectiveness that many new designers are striving for is about different ways of working, different aesthetics. And so I'm trying to argue that maybe Elliott needs to catch up to that idea to improve his work. So while the poster is still a valid format to use as an offensive posture towards collective action, Earls prints cast himself as part of the old guard of design, defending their ground with the status quo. And then that kind of leads into the second point, which is that there are new models for publishing, especially now in 2019, sort of horizontal models rather than top-down models, where creator and audience are co-authors together. It's beyond just printing something and mailing it out. As far as how things are produced, how things are disseminated, that I think is in conflict with the rest of Elliott's practice and other works that he does. What Elliott does, teaching, in his performance art and everything else, involves all these other people. And so I kind of question, why is the poster series not doing the same thing? What I write about, how I'm describing certain forms of music or landscapes or something, then translates to how I then want to visualize that formally within a poster or whatever, or typography, or even the sort of my approach. Last year I was drawing typefaces, so how I was drawing those was based off my writing in a way. So I got my book, I have Alyssa's book here.
Can you show me some of that?
Yeah.
Here, come on out here where the light is brighter.
So I got this.
Okay. So this is your thesis book, right?
My thesis book, a whole bunch of my writing from the past 2 years, and then these are mostly posters I've done, but they are cropped at actual size.
It's beautiful.
There's a huge section of that, and then finally just the actual plates of all that work, given it some context.
And then what's this?
And then this is a book for Alyssa Clower and painting.
Killer. And so this is not your work, this is Alyssa's work.
This is Alyssa's work, yeah, but this is a design by
Your design.
Brendan and I,
Okay.
yeah.
So you and Brendan.
So all this
collaborate.
typography, all these gradients, we did all that. Basically, her paintings are the only things here,
Right.
and these little cupids. But yeah, that's basically the.
Cool, flip through that again, will you?
Yeah. Oh
shirt? What's going on here? Wait, can we get a zoom in?
Wait, what's going on? Can we get a zoom in?
Nothing.
Oh.
Just show
Oh,
Rory's cool
Jesus
shirt.
Christ. Rory's cool shirt.
How'd you do on the sales, man? Good.
Pretty good, yeah. There's only like 10 shirts left or something.
Wow, and you had a lot.
Yeah, we had 60.
Oh, damn, nice. Oh, Sam, I was coming to
Who was the collab with?
Karen from 3D.
He designed.
Yeah.
Oh, turn the back around. Turn the back around.
Oh, it's the dyes you use for like tie dyeing. We went in with a brush. Oh, cool. Yeah, I guess kind of going back to that earlier point, how many of us are introduced to design criticism through that early 2000s, 90s stuff. That a lot of that was long form writing, which is what we do here, and I still think has value. But I think too many people think that's the only way to talk about criticism, and certainly with a new generation of young designers, that's not how they necessarily want to initially consume something new. I think Twitter, there's a few people on there that are definitely using I guess it's now a 280 word limit, to really get some points in and have a discussion that way. I think things on video have a lot of potential, especially as YouTube and all these YouTube personalities get bigger. So while I still think writing is important, it's something I'll probably continue doing. I think there's other avenues that we should kind of explore.
Over the course of this channel, I've made a number of videos on critique method. I'm going to link to one in the upper right-hand corner now that may be of particular interest to you if you like this video.
These prints are defensive. The density of arbitrariness in these prints, which in most cases would lead to some wide and varying interpretations, leads to almost nothing other than some cycloptical fan fiction.
Since approximately 1889, the consensus has been that a perfectly played game of chess would end in a draw.
At a certain point, we must consider that the promotion of a creative genius practice propels a far-right identitarianism movement within design.
In this analogy, it can be helpful to think of the work of art as playing white, while the critique itself as playing black.
Stating that the best designers, the ones worth mimicking and listening to, are mostly white men who, knowingly or not, make white masculine culture with the privilege of whitewashing the labor and involvement of others.
He's so thoroughly prepared. He's got an opening repertoire. He knows absolutely inside out. You know, it's almost impossible to get an advantage from the opening against him.
This is a major problem within the design profession, and as theorist Mark Fisher once stated, it is imperative to reject identitarianism and to recognize that there are no identities, only desires, interests, and identifications. Instead of freezing people into chains of already existing equivalences, the point is to treat any articulation as provisional and plastic.
The strong critic probes for weakness and strives to call the work into crisis, to place the work of art into check.
Articulations can always be created. No one is essentially anything. Our struggle must be towards the construction of a new and surprising world, not the preservation of identities shaped and distorted by capital.
Once he realizes what's going on in a position, he seems to grasp it completely, and he just churn out move after move very quickly. It's as though everything's completely sorted out in his head, and he doesn't have to work out anything at all. He just walks around and comes back and plays the moves. And fantastic speed of play, very frequently. Even when he has a tiny advantage, nothing really significant.
I am not arguing that Earls or the aforementioned agencies are propagating right-wing ideologies. The point is that these people in a position of power and thus privilege need to understand the mentality and practice they are instilling within the profession is dangerous when they insist that we cannot understand one another unless we belong to the same identity group.
Upon check, it's absolutely incumbent upon the artist. It is the artist's responsibility to accept the given criticism as true, to go back to the studio, to consider the criticism, and to look deeply enough into the possible matrix of moves on our figurative chessboard in order to move out of check and gain advantage.
And so that kind of leads then to the third point, which is that I believe that all of this individualism is a part of an old archaic model within graphic design. that has been instilled by just old white men and their dogma. And I see that in conflict with the rest of Elliott's practice and the rest of his work, which is all about incorporating others. In other words, Earls is slowly being pulled into the vicious circle that those aforementioned agency CEOs and iconic designers have been guilty of, milking the defining visual traits that gave them, as individuals, celebrity status and calling it dogma for success.
That's cheating.
That shit's cheating.
Gentlemen's conduct, please. Gentlemen's conduct.
The lack of society in Earl's prints perpetuates this vicious circle of individualism and defensiveness, leading to the interpretation of these series being exclusively for and about Earls. He too is a filthy, toxic, tunnel vision cyclops. To depict these prints as being conceived without the input, feedback, or cultural influence of others is misdirecting both himself and his audience from the intellectually provocative and diverse future he seems to be striving for. Why isn't Earls experimenting with communal ways in which a poster can be illustrated and disseminated, similar to his pedagogical methods, performance films, and early new media works?
Boy.
If I can't explain it to an 8-year-old, then I probably don't know what I'm talking about. And actually, I just read this other line recently from the theorist Zizek, where he says, "I'm the idiot I'm trying to explain philosophy to." I'd say I'm the same way. It's writing in a way is to educate myself as well as whoever I'm critiquing. And at the same time, I like to I try to treat what I'm writing as an ellipsis, that this is a beginning of a conversation for not just me and whoever I'm writing for, but for the audience that's reading it.
If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, comment, and subscribe. It really helps me out when you subscribe. You can also support the channel by purchasing an Earls ADSR chalkboard style tee.